around the world that stood for us and laid down their lives for us. So I just want to say that I'm very grateful and very honoured to stand here.
In the bleak mid-autumn, we watch the poppies grow. Day by day, night by night, at wars where they were sown. As they marched through the trenches, we all waited at home, nervous, impatient, for when they come we might never know. Warriors in battle, fallen like the leaves, sailing to battle in their ships, like Vikings at the seas, chewing at the raisin biscuits, sipping on the tea, mums sending their letters, telling them to make sure they brush their teeth. Strong and mighty, hard-working men, preparing their letters ready to send, telling their families about all their new friends, telling their wives that they love them, about the places they've went. In the end, our brothers, fathers, uncles were ever so brave. No matter what, they enjoy the mansions that God has gave to them in heaven where their souls are placed, remembering them and knowing all those that they have saved.
My step-great-granddad had a copy of the last edition of the NZCSG Times, which was printed during December 1945. Issued by the 2nd New Zealand Expeditionary Force, this serial was free to all NZCSG personnel. It was published mainly in Egypt, but a few editions were from Italy. This is a reading from page 7 of the NZCSG Times. This piece is titled Killed in Action Remedy, 1944. To Ian. Silver dust still slowly rises through the Makarapa pines, and dark karakas cast their bright-hued fruit to lay on green sheltered slopes that rise behind the peaceful farm, where the grape leaves slowly wither on a long low line of vines. Where in summer creeps the soft sea fog at night, midst the sparse Italian herbage in a barren shell-poked field. Stands out clear your lonely cross of shining white. Your golden span remains in the wretched hearts of those who are living with your image ever near. And though our souls are sad and lonely with you gone, your memories make our lives much more rich and dear. RHB, October 1945.
So to me, being a history teacher, in the classrooms I taught, we taught the significance of war. We taught how profound war was, how deeply war resonated through society, the time it's taken for us to understand what happened. The details were only part of it, but it's very much like an iceberg. You can see, what was war. We've got our cenotaphs and our memorials all around the country, but what's lie underneath, which is, I guess, the true spirit of what, we carry with us today around what is, Anzac Day. Like Heidi, my great uncle, John Patrick Holland, and my grandfather's namesake, he died on the 29th of March 1918, some 8 months before the end of World War I. And he is buried at the Hoodenville War Cemetery, commemorated by the Commonwealth War Graves. I've not had the opportunity to go there. I want to one day, but my grandfather did. And it was an incredible, moving time for him. I've got the newspaper clipping and that picture very close to me in my room at home. It'll stay there. My older brother, Patrick John Holland, he served in the Gulf War for the Australian Armed Services. So my thoughts and prayers go out to him today, as they do all for all family members, all of you who have got family members, and the very people standing in front of me here today who have served actively overseas or here in New Zealand. Today, very muchly, we are in a war of our own over hearts and minds. And I think, again, Heidi's touched on that, and we cannot forget and we must move forward with our own battles, I guess, in that regards. And we continue, here today with that community spirit to keep it alive. So I thank you for coming out today in support of Anzac Day. It's one, I guess, unlike no other, but it's special, and I'm heartened to have you all here and to have this opportunity to speak with you. So please take a moment today to reflect on what Anzac Day is for us, for you, for your family, for those of you that have lost loved ones, and for those of you that, stand back and remember the experiences of what you've been through. So my warmest greetings to you all, and thank you for this opportunity to speak today.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. Greetings to you all. My name's Heidi Jensen-Warren, and on behalf of the North Canterbury Community Support Group, we welcome you to our very first Anzac Day service. It was many weeks ago now that we decided that we would commit to holding a service for whoever wanted to attend. I did try to advertise it at local shops, but such is the patriotic zeal of our local shops, they don't seem to want to put up flyers. You see, I keep something very precious, my granddad's war medals that he passed on to me. And there was no way I was going to let him or my dada, my other grandfather, down. I couldn't let their years of sacrifice, their stories, their experiences, and our shared family history be undermined or diminished. Anzac Day to me is one of the most sacred days on the New Zealand calendar. It's a day that should not be relegated to a driveway or a mere ho-hum news broadcast. It's vital that on each Anzac Day we try to come together as a community and as a people and as a nation to commemorate our forebears and those that gave their all. The history of our nation should not be rewritten or pushed aside or downplayed. This is a day to remember the combined energies of the people of New Zealand at a time of great struggle and crisis. Men, women and children of Australia and New Zealand rolled up their sleeves and faced adversity with integrity, strength and honour during 2 consecutive wars. My grandfathers both willingly signed up to join the forces during World War II. Dada was a fighter pilot in the Pacific. He trained in Canada and throughout New Zealand before serving in Bougainville. His aircraft, which was on display at the Air Force Museum for many years, was a Grumman Avenger. I always think it's amazing he survived, considering the high risk he faced each day. His skills as a pilot and a bomber would have to have been exceptional. Granddad served in Egypt and Italy as an armoured tank driver. Eventually he ended up in Japan towards the end of the war. Whilst Dada had for most of his service fought the Japanese in the Pacific, a truly formidable foe, Granddad witnessed the devastation that nuclear warfare had reduced parts of Japan to. Only after his death did I witness the photographs that he had taken during his time in Japan. Holding them in my hand, I thought of Granddad's words to me. War, Heidi, is a terrible, terrible thing. For me, a child born in the latter part of the 70s, I grew up in what can only be described as a country that was overshadowed by the backdrop of 2 not too distant wars. The war was a common theme on our national television and in movies. We sang old-time war songs at school. I couldn't go far in my grandparents' car without Glenn Miller or other wartime music ringing in my ears, and the war was a familiar topic of conversation in my extended family's homes. Their grandfathers and great-uncles were heroes. They were a different breed of men. They stood in the face of the ever-present threat of death and injury for years. Far from their loved ones, far from their comfortable, peaceful New Zealand homes, they knew that without their sacrifice, their pain, their suffering, their valour, that their families, their fiancés, wives and sisters and kids back at home would face a grim future. Not many of our younger generation know the reality of life in New Zealand during those war years, but they should know. Children back then had a great deal of responsibility. For many young boys, they face becoming the man of the house without their dads around. Many children, alongside their mothers and aunties, took up work as part of the national effort to support the troops and keep the country running. These Kiwis at home also had plans for what to do in the event of a foreign invasion. The big what if, when if was ever present in these men, women and children's minds. They were not going to surrender or go down without a fight. They had plans for where to flee and where to hide, and these young children knew that there was a very real possibility that they would have to defend their siblings and mothers. They were truly tough people. Over the last few years, Anzac Days meant more and more to me. Now that all my grandparents have passed on and I've been given the honour of wearing Grandad's medals, I do feel the weight of carrying on their legacy. I've thought a lot over the past week about my great-grandfathers. 2 of them served during World War I in the trenches. I just can't imagine what kind of horror they witnessed. Recently, I saw a long line of beautiful poplar trees. They are immensely tall. They stand on my great-grandparents' former farm in rural Nelson. You see, my grandfather planted them before he went to the Western Front. I wonder if they brought him some luck, something to envisage returning to. His brother, my great-great-uncle Albert, whose grave I visited some years ago now in Étaples, France, is among thousands of graves of soldiers at a Commonwealth war cemetery. I made a pilgrimage there during my OE on behalf of my grandma, and I became, sadly, the first family member to visit him since his death from shrapnel wounds in 1916. His brother George Howard, my great-grandfather, incredibly survived a bullet wound to his head, and against all odds returned to New Zealand after his hospital treatment in England. He married, raised a family, was a successful farmer, and here my great-grandma housed and treated returned servicemen and others affected by the Spanish flu in their home following the war. He was a good Christian soul. Incidentally, he lived to a ripe old age despite having shrapnel fragments permanently in his head. My family's Anzac stories are a small drop in the ocean of stories that make up our national heritage. These brave men and women and children shaped New Zealand and ensured that we exist as we do today. It is because of their indelible spirit, courage and deep commitment to the pursuit of freedom that we have to ensure that their legacy is maintained. You see, they chose freedom over fear. History, facts and figures and data is one side of the equation, but the spirit and the meaning and the energy of Anzac Day is what must live on. Freedom over fear, lest we forget.